Perfect. Ken, when you're ready.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to the first session after lunch. My name's Ken Titmus, and we're going to be talking about developing an internal demand-driven materials requirements planning maturity matrix. Let me just share my slides, hopefully. Okay, can you see my slide there, Connor? Hello?
Yes, Ken, yeah. It's up.
It's up. Okay, fine. Thank you. All right, so we're going to be talking about implementing DDMRP in Africa. I was involved in a project with Coca-Cola Beverages Africa about a year or so ago, implementing DDMRP in ultimately 9 countries. I have with me this afternoon two of the people that were involved in that implementation. And we've got Josephine from CCBA in Uganda, and I've got Leo from CCBA in Mozambique. And they're going to be talking after me. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the generic implementation process. How easy or how difficult is it to get into a DDMRP implementation? Josephine's going to talk a little bit about her implementation in Uganda, and some of the challenges that they had. And then Leo's going to take over and start talking about the next level. They've started to put a maturity matrix together for CCBA. Not all the countries are at the same level at this moment in time. So let me just have a look at the generic implementation. The implementation we did with Coca-Cola in Africa, currently there's 9 countries that have gone with DDMRP. And in those 9 countries, there are somewhere in the region of about 90 manufacturing and distribution sites across the continent. There are about 40 planners that are using the system to plan materials in the DDMRP system. And in total, there are about 10,000 SKUs in the system and about 7,000 bills of materials. Now, the whole system sits in one instance within a cloud-based software. And it means that anybody in the system can really look at what's happening across the continent. It means that somebody at a high level could be looking at all the countries that have implemented. They could be looking at a single country, or you could be looking at a single entity like a manufacturing plant or a distribution center. So it means that anybody and everybody has got access, if you've given them access, to have a look what's happening. The beauty of this is also that those people that are implementing, because it's cloud-based, we don't actually have to go to the site. We can see exactly what the site sees as well. So let's just go back a little bit and talk about how easy is it to get started. Well, many of you may have attended a few presentations, and I've done quite a few myself on an intro to DDMRP. And you may have attended some of these presentations, and it may have awakened some interest in you on the subject. What I would suggest you do is go to the Demand Driven Institute website. That's demanddriveninstitute.com. And there you will find many case studies, and there's a huge amount of information on there about the DDMRP process. And once you have some curiosity and some questions, you might wonder how this system might work for you. Well, if you have some interest, you can always contact us. And one of the things I do quite a lot of is introducing a company to the methodology using an introduction. So what I like to do is within your company, get the management team together We can give them a free 1.5 hour intro to the demand-driven process. And we can have some discussions as to how it might work for you. Once we've done that, if you need a little bit more information, then what I would suggest you do is get your core planning team together. These are the people that are doing procurement, shop floor planning or distribution planning, people involved in inventory management or materials, warehousing, for example. Get them together, and we can also give you a free 3-hour basic training workshop where we go into a little bit more detail than you'll get in the introduction, but you'll get a far better understanding of the 5 components of DDMRP. Other things we can do is to take some of your past demand data. So maybe just take one of your warehouses, for example, get the past demand data for the last year, and we can put that into a simulator. And we can simulate how the buffers would have reacted last year based on your actual demand data. And we can see what benefits that you might get from putting in a DDMRP implementation. As far as right sizing your inventory, most cases people have too much inventory, and so we find we get an inventory reduction. But I think the key of DDMRP is improving customer service and then right sizing your inventory. Once you've done that and you can see some opportunities, you might say, well, let's start looking at putting an implementation plan together. And quite honestly, in a medium-sized company, this is not like putting in an ERP system. We can do this fairly quickly. And just to give you an idea, with Coca-Cola, we spent a few days with them. Globally, the people from the various countries, this is when we could travel, came into South Africa, and we had a week of going through some education, going through looking at how we can put the model together. Once we'd done that, we then started looking at the various countries, and it was actually Namibia we started with. And we went there and spent about 3 or 4 days in Namibia, looking at a model for them, looking at what the requirements were going to be as far as data was concerned. We then left them for a couple of weeks and then came back and did the implementation. And in all, that took about a month. And in all, we were doing about 1 country a month. So once we finished Namibia, we moved into Uganda, and we did Uganda, and then we did Mozambique. By the time we'd finished the 3 countries, the internal implementation team had sufficient knowledge and understanding of how to go and do this on their own. And we didn't really get too involved at the end of the day. So they went off and implemented in the other 6 countries. So normally I say to people, it's going to take you about 3 months probably. But the first thing we need to do is to get the people educated. And the Demand Driven Institute has a Demand Driven Planner course which we can use. And we can then put a project plan together over that 3 months. We also have another course which is called the DDMRP Implementation Support. This is not as in-depth as the Demand Driven Planner, but it does give people within the organization some understanding of how things are going to change in the business. And then, of course, we need to do some software training and some implementation. So what are some of the requirements that are needed? Yes, we need data to be able to run DDMRP. We need your parts. We need to understand your parts per location. We need to understand, if possible, your past demand data, because we can use that to use the Smart Buffer Profiler to try and determine what are the best buffer profiles for a particular item at a particular location. And then on a daily basis, we need to understand what the current inventories are, what the current demand and the current supply is on each buffer. And we pull those in. It does the calculations, the net flow calculations, and determines what needs to be replenished, and what needs to be bought and what needs to be made. We also need your bills and routings, because there's another methodology that we have as well, which is demand-driven sales and operations planning, and we can look into the future using your forecasts. So a proposed implementation budget is not that expensive either. Demand-driven education we need to put in place. We need to get some software. Most software is cloud-based, subscription-based, and it's based on the value of the inventory which you're going to be managing, not necessarily how many users you've got or how many sites you've got. And then there'll be a little bit of consulting and education, and that's not a great deal. I reckon 100 hours or less, as far as that is concerned, will probably satisfy most medium-sized companies. If you're still not sure, we do have a flow simulation game, and this is going to be happening in about a month's time, and it's sponsored by Demand-Driven Technologies. Many of you may have played the MIT beer game, which demonstrates the bullwhip effect. So what we do is in the first round, we demonstrate this bullwhip effect. And in the second round, we then put buffers between these entities, and we can see how it mitigates the bullwhip effect in the supply chain and how it could benefit your particular supply chains. There will be some more information about this later on, but there's only 36 spaces available. And if you want to register for this, then I suggest you go to the SAPICS website, sapics.org/events, and it's on Wednesday, the 22nd of September, so you can register there. So now you're ready for your no-go or go decision. Most people decide to go, I would say. And then what we can do is have regular support. And this is one of the things we've done with Coca-Cola over the last few months, or last few years, in fact, is that on a regular basis, on a Wednesday, we always have a meeting. Anybody in the country in Coca-Cola can come onto that meeting and we can support them. They can ask questions. If they have queries, it means that we can actually go and look at their data on the cloud-based site, and a lot of problems can be resolved in that way. We've also started using this now to try and put in some improvements into the system that they are using and giving more education and training. If you want to know more about DDMRP and particularly the demand-driven technologies, if you tune in on Thursday at the conference at 2:10, you can listen to Eric Bush. Eric is the CEO of Demand-Driven Technologies. He's going to be talking about demand-driven sales and operations planning. And then more importantly, after that, we've got Carol Patak and Dick Ling, who are going to be talking about the adaptive S&OP process, which is the strategic process of a demand-driven adaptive enterprise. So those are two sessions that you shouldn't really miss. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Josephine, are you ready to take over?
I'll share mine.
Okay.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I think we can. Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Ken, for that phase of presentation, and greetings to you all. I'll take us through the challenges of implementation, particularly in Uganda, and how we overcame these challenges. Our implementation process was a first one. This took us about 5 days to accomplish. We started with the full master data review, where we, like Ken explained before, we mapped all our materials. We have about 4 plants. So we mapped all those materials to our existing ERP system, which is SAP in this case. And then we went on to upload this master data into our DDMRP system that captured initial buffer profile configurations that would be the buy, the distribute and make items for our manufacturing process. And then finally, that took us to our planning priorities focus, where as planners, we are focused to look at the critical and high alert items for execution with our daily order recommendations coming through our DDMRP system. Looks like a simple, straightforward process, but this brought a few challenges that we'll see in our next slide and how we overcame them. So moving on, pretty much the challenges were evolving around stabilizing our data because it was our key component into DDMRP. With the historical data horizon capped at 12 weeks that we were initially working with, we realized that we had to stretch this beyond the 12 weeks in order to capture history of infrequently used items, such that we could also map these and also create buffer profiles for them. Then we had also the data uploads and reloads followed by the cleanup, because as you review the process, you upload data and then you review accuracy of that data in terms of order cycle, in terms of lead time, in terms of minimum order quantities, order multiples as well, in regards to the different raw materials that we're working with, as well as finished products for the 4 plants that we were implementing this tool for. We also encountered an issue to do with forecasted daily usage being different from the actual usage that was actually happening. The tool challenged us on the assumption, because initially with the planning that we had, we thought we were on a good track, but we realized that with the DDMRP tool, the inventories actually that we were keeping were much more than what is recommended based on the buffer profiles that were allocated to those particular materials, and that we had to rework to be able to buffer those configurations specific to those materials in terms of their lead times. Some of them would take about 75 days. Then others would be as short as 7 days because of internal supply replenishment in country for the materials that are available locally. So we had to do all that to ensure that our expectation versus reality was actually coming close. Then also we encountered issues to do with buffer allocations because as you run through the materials through this system, automatic buffer profiles are allocated to these materials, but we realized that some materials were actually left out, and we had to manually create those buffer profiles for those materials just to ensure that all of them are being captured at the same time and consistently reviewed to the accuracy that we needed to move. Then in terms of obsolete materials, we had a number of them that actually came through the portfolio complexity that we had, that with the infrequent usage of these materials and the when you track backwards through the historical horizon, you realize that this is probably a material that has been used like once in 2 years. Then we realized that we had to actually reassess whether we really needed this this material for the balance of year or going forward, or we can actually change it for another or swap it for another. So those were the options that we're looking into. Then, of course, the data review and cleanup is a consistent repeat, because actually, since the supply chain is too rapid and there is a lot of variability, we realize that this has to be a consistent and constant process to ensure that the master data is accurate, to give us the right information and the right order recommendations that are required to pull through. So move on to how we overcame these challenges. We mapped these to actually consistent and continuous education. One was taking meaning, talking the DDMRP lingo, understanding the vocabulary involved, learning it, disseminating it, and actually be able to cascade it to the wider team, because we have the short flow team that supports the manufacturing, and also the distribution team that supports the distribution of these products across these plants. We also went into the willingness, where we engaged the different functions into the benefits of what DDMRP system can actually bring to the table, the benefits, the high service levels of DDMRP, as well as the inventory reductions of about 30 to 40%. That the team and the entire functions across the business bought into. Then also the logic. These are the interventions in the buffer adjustments. This is really a support function, and it is entirely to the planner activity controls, where you find that you have to run the advanced planning module to be able to see the order recommendations. That's for the high and critical items, such that these are followed up to execution to ensure that there is no exposure in terms of out of stock on finished product and raw materials, as well as working capital, to ensure that you're keeping optimal inventory at any point in time. Then we went on to the ability that is building on the system resilience, that with the demonstrated elasticity during the COVID-19, that gave us an option of adjusting lead times to ensure that the lead times are actually captured in due time, for us to be able to maintain our stock cover with no exposure, and for continuity of the business without interruption. So that is what we went through in overcoming all these challenges. Moving on, we'll look at the results that came through. That dark black line is our target inventory. Then the purple line that is running across is the on-hand inventory that we are holding. So for the last 12 months of our finished goods, you realize that this is a buffer trend for our DDMRP system. You realize that we have been stable for the last 8 months. As you see, the first about 4 months were unstable because you see the inventory, the target inventory was higher than the on hand. Then you see as we got along, the target inventory came closer to the on hand, and we are realizing stability at this point in time. So that has improved because of data quality and of course buffer optimizations that are ongoing. So the cleanup has to consistently happen for you to realize accuracy in this system. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Leo to take us through the next phase.
Thanks, Josephine. I'm just going to share my screen now very quickly so we don't lose any time. Okay. Connor, will you let me know if all looks good?
Yes, yeah, all good.
Okay. So this is the next step for us. So we've had all these implementations in the country, and they all started at different times. So obviously every country is sitting in a different place right now. And the question for us is really what happens next? And I work personally in Mozambique, but the work that I'm presenting is the work that we've done or we're doing actually on behalf of the whole of CCBA, and it's also impacting all of the implementations. So really, what do we want? We want to know where we stand, right? Every single country. And this is an internal thing. We need to understand where we stand so we can move together, right, and advance. So there's a few reasons that the big reasons that have taken us on this journey to come up with a maturity matrix, a maturity framework, whatever you want to call it, to not just benchmark, but then drive drive our game plan, which is our big strategy within supply chain to advance all the planning teams, and then obviously impact supply chain as a whole in CCBA Africa. So number one, we want to know where we are, right? And then that all has to align to the big, sort of demand-focused supply chain. Number two is we wanted to leverage on shared knowledges. So different countries had different sort of stages of their process or their progress post-implementation. Some picked up faster than others. Some developed, sort of experiences and that others didn't. And then we wanted to have this like sort of community-based sharing, which would allow us to sort of push each other and all the peer countries to move up together. And then obviously finally is exactly the whole point, which is progress. And this progress for us is internally would be using the DDMRP software that Ken and his company sort of allowed us to implement, is to make sure that we're running at the highest level operationally. So having a DDOM or a DD or a demand-driven operating model, which is functioning at 100%. And then second is aligning our maturity and our capability to ensure that we hit the first sort of big stage, which according to the Demand-Driven Institute is called, so it's the tactical stage of it, which is called a demand-driven sales and operational planning process. So we've had S&OP in Coca-Cola for years, but right now is probably the moment where we want every single country to get that extra bit of advancement, of modernization, of moving away from this supply chain instability, and which was always driven by forecasting. And as we know, and if you have already experienced with DDMRP, you'll understand that DDMRP decouples you from that forecast, and it gives you other inputs which allow for much greater stability through the supply chain, because your input signals become demand and not just forecast. And forecasts are always wrong, and we know this. So as we designed the maturity and we built this from scratch, the point was to know how to do it. So we've come up with a simplistic approach. We've taken from the experience that we've had. And again, this work has started a few months after most of the countries had already been implemented and sort of running the DDMRP software. So we looked at just a simplistic structure. We thought about grouping it into dimensions. We took a few metrics of the most important aspects which we thought would make us not just align with the demand-driven institute requirements for a DDS NOP, but also align with the software we had and the maximum utilization of that software, and obviously the maximum gain from it, right? Extracting that maximum gain. So as an example, we set these dimensions, we got metrics, and they would come up to a maturity index, so a big number for each country, which puts it somewhere within what we've designed to be a four-stage approach, a four-stage maturity approach. And we did it, and looking at a few countries that we had, we realized there were common things among them. And so the dimensions we decided to pick on are the ones on the screen. We realized one, Josephine was talking a lot about data quality and just making sure that data stability is there. And that has a lot to do with housekeeping and sort of a compliance within the DDMRP system. So that's a basic. And it takes, as Josephine says, it takes continuous and consistent work. So it's not something you do in 1 month and you're done. Because our dynamics in our supply chain and in this industry we're in are now so rapid, so uncertain, so volatile, you definitely need to have that aspect very strong. And then second would be planner efficiency. So our planners, the people that operate the system on a daily basis, see how they are executing it. They have to execute it at a certain level. We obviously realize that complexity management, so the portfolio complexity, is something very connected to DDMRP in general. I mean, we're talking inventory levels and we're talking working capital, but then we're also talking about materials that get left out, materials that are actually just putting in noise into the system, and they're actually not as used as we expect them to be used. So there's an aspect of that, and obviously an aspect of education, which is really about making sure that the more tactical and especially the more strategic considerations are taken by not just the planners, but the managers of each country. So planning managers of each country, when they operate the system and when they use the system in their supply, in their sales and operational planning processes. And these are capabilities that are really what we want to achieve together with the operational aspects of it. And that would take us to what we would assume to be a pretty advanced stage of maturity for ourselves. And then just in general, these stages are pretty just simplistically described. So stage one would be right after Ken comes in, he does the implementation. This is a whole setup. This is what Josephine was talking about in the beginning, data, that first initial data sort of work and stabilization. And then, of course, there's the continuous training and support. Then stage two, if a country scores around stage two, it would mean that they've already running the system. They've had some time running it. They've got the routines, okay, of the planners entrenched. They're doing housekeeping pretty okay. And then they already starting to understand concepts of buffer, assessment, the buffer adjustments, how to influence the buffers or how to use them to better have, the lowest out of stock or the highest stock availability. Okay. Stage three would be basically when we start moving up, advanced operations, we call it. And it's basically saying, okay, we know how to operate the system, but we also know how to use the system for a more advanced, more strategic, more longer horizon impact. Okay. And this is where you start connecting, our DDMRP model, our software into a whole sales and operational planning process. Okay. And then obviously stage four would be this where we achieve a variety of things, in which you'd have also strong senior stakeholder, buy-in, confidence level, and you have a DDSNOP, which is a demand-driven sales operational planning in motion, and a few other aspects. So you would have to be doing every single thing on the previous stages really well to be able to also get to stage 4. And then just to kind of get to the end of it, what this all looks really nice, but the question is, what are the challenges that we have with it? And it looks very nice on the slide and talking about it, but there are a few things that came up while we've been designing the model, while we've been kind of going through this journey. And I like the sort of the metaphor of the iceberg, because there's so much under the water that we don't expect, or that majority of companies don't really understand that's going to happen. So first is simplicity in the approach. So we needed to choose something simple. I mean, this is a world of so many complex concepts, and there's so much going on. We needed a maturity model, or a way to assess it, to understand where we were. Simple, easy, and obviously validated and logical, but without complexity. We used a lot of the DDI, so the Demand-Driven Institute inputs. We've used our partners, which are the suppliers of our software. They've also given us a lot of sort of input from their own experiences working at their companies, just a general logic understanding of how maybe other organizations are doing, and that helped us design a simple approach. Obviously, the second challenge is the metrics, or the KPIs, because all of these criteria that I've described in the previous slides, in the dimensions that we used, required to exist. They must be simply, automatically from the system. You don't want to have a maturity model that takes you 2 weeks to sort of assess and evaluate, right? And so what we've done is we've partnered up even stronger with our supplier of the software of the system, and they have been developing continuously everything that we need to make sure that we get a maturity framework in place, easy and accessible. Setting realistic goals, pretty key. Seems simple, but not really. These things take time, and they take longer than 6 months. And the maturity that you expect from within those stages that we've designed requires around about a year or 12 months of work, of properly focused work. And so we need to really very strongly put every single expectation, just be very honest with the stakeholders, be very honest with our in-country senior management teams, and with this Coca-Cola group, which that the process is actually a huge journey, which is really about transformation. And this transformation comes from the fact that you need to build a lot of trust in the system. This is not just a planning team thing. This is a whole organizational change. And so there's a lot of connection and strengthening of the concepts that you need to bring into the exposure of senior stakeholders, senior management, and also expose the DDSNOP or the SNOP connection to demand-driven planning. Okay, and then to finalize, what are we doing next? In actual terms, we're now going to be soon running the maturity assessment. Okay, we're getting the model validated. My clock is already ticking, and together with the continuous education, right, that we've been doing, and we're gonna start closing those gaps. We know where the countries are, what is missing, and eventually you're getting into the point where we're going to be, we want to be comfortable and say that all of our countries are running at the DDSNOP highly 100% functional level. Okay, and that would eventually take us to another challenge and another roadmap, another journey, which would be eventually getting to an adaptive SNOP. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for hearing us, our experiences, and we're pretty much open to questions that you might have.
Leo and Josephine, thank you very much. we don't seem to have any questions. So either you've done a brilliant job or a lousy job on the question. But for anybody that's still hanging in there and listening, if you go into the handouts, you will see that there is a handout there on the flow simulation game, which I spoke about earlier. So you can download that information. And as I said before, go to the SAPICS website and go to events, and you'll see the flow game on there, and you can register. And as I say, there is a limit. We're only going to have 36 people, or only 36 people can join in the game. And yeah, hopefully we can see you there. Let me just check if there's any questions again. There don't seem to be any questions. So thank you very much for attending. The session has been recorded, so you'll be able to listen to it again. And I believe you will be able to get the copy of the slides as well. So, any last words, Leo, Josephine?
I think, Ken, for anyone that's listening or just kind of being sort of exposed to DDMRP through us, it definitely is something you need to consider as you're going into this extremely volatile context that we're living in. Try it out. Also, understand that the solidification between the provider or the supplier of your system is extremely key when you want to do continuous improvement. So if you choose something that you just want to implement out of the box, it's the wrong approach. You really need to consider a much more longer sort of journey together, and you need to choose someone really strong to be able to, flexible with proper support, a proper sort of technological advancement to be able to support you in the journey that you will have, because DDMRP is going to absolutely rock that boat, and so you need really strong partners next to you for that.
Thanks, Leo. Josephine?
I agree with you, Leo and Ken. From experience, recently with the pandemic offsetting us, we realized that if we didn't have a strong monitoring system that actually works best for us to have other recommendations come through with no strain, it's really a demonstrated support in terms of planning, replenishment, and of course, managing the working capital. I would recommend companies to consider this. The better part is that our clients or our partners consider a support system. This can be tailored actually to match your needs for your particular line of business. So I would really recommend that you take on DDMRP as part of the system. Thank you.
Thanks, Josephine. So if any of you want to know more, you can visit the Demand Driven Africa exhibition stand. Leave your card there or leave a message, and we can get back to you at some stage. So next session starts at 20 past, and it's a keynote with Daniel Stanton. So hopefully we'll see you around in the lounges or on the exhibition stages sometimes. Thanks, Leo. Thanks, Josephine. Keep well, everybody. We'll see you at the next session.